Hello, everyone. We are back in My Energy Game, another podcast. And today we've got a really good friend of our project, Will Fraser. Will Fraser used to play for the Saracens. He's a former rugby player, and he's currently the founder and the director of 101st. How are you, Will?
I'm very good, my friend. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. How is life?
Yeah, good. Busy, which is all you can ask for at the moment, isn't it? So yeah, can't complain.
Excellent. I mean, just so everyone knows, Will came the other day to visit at Crystal Palace, and it was great. We had a lovely conversation, and that's why it triggered this podcast. And basically, we decided that we are going to get the title of "Winning Dressing Room Culture," which it sounds really fancy and really cool. But tell us, Will, why winning dressing room culture? What's your background? What's your story?
So I suppose it's relevant for me being a professional rugby player and being in the dressing room and being part of a club where culture was kind of what we were all about. So we, in my time at the club, we went from one of the most underperforming club sides in Europe to one of the top performing club sides in the world. And fundamentally, that success came through a change in culture. And to getting this common purpose, shared values, common goals, and getting everyone bought into what we were trying to do. And then obviously talking to you and learning more about football, and that the phrase "the manager's lost the dressing room" gets chucked about quite a lot in football. So I suppose it made sense for that to be a topic of conversation.
Absolutely. And I remember when we were talking, and you said, "Well, what we did was changing the culture." And obviously that's like, okay, brilliant, changing the culture. But what's that about? I mean, what's changing the culture? What can you say tangible things that obviously
Yeah.
give us an idea of how you did it?
Yeah, sure. So I think first and foremost, it was understanding what our current culture was. Um, so every organisation or every group of people had that a culture exists.
Yeah.
Whether it's good, bad, ugly, all the rest of it, it's there to figure out. But there is a culture of some sort. So I think first and foremost is understanding what ours was, and ours was very much before what we now call like the revolution in 2009. Was very much this culture of short-term thinking, being outcome focused, thinking we could bring in the odd superstar here and there, and it would turn our fortunes round. So it wasn't the best culture, wasn't a healthy one. There was definitely no concept of all buying into a shared purpose and this feeling of belonging. It was very cliquey. So the biggest tangible changes were a new purpose for the club, new values for the club, and the process of developing them was very much player driven. So it was getting the buy-in, getting everyone to understand what that purpose means for them, understand what the values mean for them, what they mean for the team, and then actually tangibly, how can we live them? So what do they actually look like as a person, and what do they look like as a rugby player, and what do they look like in the game, in training, and having those kind of levels of understanding. The byproduct of doing that process was actually we got to know each other a hell of a lot better, which means we got better relationships, means we trust each other better, which then in turn means you're a much more cohesive unit, which obviously then has huge benefits for the job. So when you're playing rugby, when you're out in games and tough matches and finals, all the rest of it, it's those intangible relationships are the things that really kind of pull you through. I remember the first premiership we won was 2 years. So when we had this revolution in 2009, we finished, I think, second bottom of the league the year before.
Oh,
In
wow.
2009, we reached the premiership final for the first time ever. So in the space of a year,
Wow.
complete 180 shift. Then there was this worry, as you get a lot in all sports, is it a honeymoon period because we've got a new guy in charge, we're going through this process. The following year, we won the final for the first time ever. And there was 9 minutes extra time, of which we spent, I think, 8 minutes 30 of that camped on our try line, just defending.
Wow.
And it was those, when you watch that 9 minutes back, what you see is those intangible relationships and those intangible levels of trust where boys are just going out for each other. It's completely selfless. And then after that, in the following 10 years, we won 4 more premierships and 3 European Cups. So,
Wow.
That ability to kind of maintain that level was because it was built on a genuine foundation of good people who had, I'm going to repeat what I just said, but had the shared values, common goals, and all the rest of it. And then for those that know rugby, you know it kind of came tumbling down a little bit in January 2020 when we got caught up in a salary cap issue. But yeah, so it's just, you know, I feel extremely privileged when doing having these conversations that I was part of the club during that kind of chunk of history. And, you know, not only did it have a huge impact on my rugby, but it's had a huge impact on me as a person. You know, those values, the things I learned on that journey are things I try and continue to live by now in kind of the real world, in inverted commas.
And it's funny because probably those values now and those, and you're talking about relationships, you're talking about trust, you're talking that obviously now that has gone beyond your rugby days and beyond your playing career. And obviously that's why you created your company, 101st. And that's why obviously we link up together with My Energy Game, because we thought that we share those values. And it's brilliant when I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about obviously over football industry, over football. And it happens the same. I mean, sometimes we don't realize how much relationships, trust, share goals, share values can help the team. And there are loads of teams in football that they do the same. Will they go for like, oh, let's focus on the outcomes. Let's get a few fancy players, the best players that we think that we can get, and then we will win, and that will be the success of the team. But they forget about that togetherness. They forget about those relationships. So was it the arrival of the new manager? Was it you guys as a dressing room meeting up and saying we need to change this, we cannot come up second bottom again? What was the tipping point for you?
Yeah, it was a new CEO and a new director of rugby they were the catalyst for it all. So, and our owner. So our owner's, he's owned the club for a long, long time. And essentially he kind of comes out now and says that before, so Brendan Ventle was the guy that came and he was the director of rugby, and Edward Griffiths was the CEO. And Nigel kind of comes out many times post everything that's happened saying that we tried everything to turn the club around before. We tried to chuck money at the situation, we tried to get the best players, we tried to do X, Y, and Z, and nothing worked. So when Brendan came along and kind of told me his philosophy of actually, effectively we just want to create good people. Because if we create good people, we'll create good rugby players, and we want to make memories. Our purpose at the club was 2 words: make memories.
Wow.
And there was this whole premise that actually rugby's quite a finite career. If we can create long-lasting relationships that go past rugby, we create learnings for the players that they can take into their post-rugby careers. Actually, that makes them better rugby players here and now, because they're more present, they're more aware, and all these things. And Nigel said initially, he tried everything else. So he thought, I might as well give it a go. We've got nothing to lose from it. And I think where we were lucky and where football's slightly different is that we had the luxury of time, because we were rubbish. As I said, we finished second, but there was no pressure on us to turn it around quickly. There was no pressure on us to suddenly start, talking to Brendan after it all. I think the initial plan was that this was like a 3-4 year plan. We weren't really going to see the benefits of this till a lot later down the line. And unfortunately, because the people that were there and the buy-in, it happened a lot quicker than that. And this is the really interesting thing with culture. It's a very counterintuitive way of thinking, because in order to create culture, you've got to spend time not doing your job and talking about what it is you want the culture to be, what you want the values to be, how you want the relationships to be built. And for a lot of people, when you look in corporate world, essentially, you're saying, right, you need to take time away from your desk to have these conversations. And a lot of people initially say, yeah, of course, no dramas. But as soon as you do that and they realize someone's not manning the phone, someone's not, answering the calls, they go, actually, no, we can't do this. We need to get. And then that completely contradicts everything you're then trying to do when you're trying to create a culture. And I think in football, you get, because of the transient nature of it, particularly at the top level. And, I think the average lifespan for a Premier League coach manager is now 0.8 years or something crazy. So
or even less.
This is it. So you kind of go, well, why would you then waste that short period of time not focusing purely on the football? And so I understand it, but it's if you can get an owner that actually will give someone the gift of time and say, look, I know what we're building here is real. I know it will have an impact down the line. So I'm going to give you a year, 2 years to lay those foundations. Then after that, if nothing changes, then obviously that's another conversation to be had. But I think that's the that was our kind of trifecta, is we had new CEO, new director of rugby, and an owner that actually gave us the gift of time and no pressure to give it a go.
So I suppose it's the alignment, right? We were talking about this the other day when you came to the training ground. Is that alignment between the people above, the players, the management, the coaches, to think that, well, we are going to go for it, and we are buying into it, and as you said, it's not outcome driven. And it's funny because listening to you, I could picture some of these companies probably going crazy, trying to get more profitable and trying to do this and that, and probably squeezing every second out of their employees. And probably they don't realize that what they're doing is not allowing those employees to kind of like be creative and flourish, and therefore they might not become as profitable as they could. And football is the same.
This is exactly it. It's that kind of short-termism against, you know, the longer term plan, because actually by taking that time away and allowing people to form better relationships, to build trust, build cohesion, the natural byproduct of that is they're going to perform better in whatever their job is. Doesn't matter. They're going to perform better because they know each other better, because they're going to help each other out. They're going to share information. They're going to know what the bigger picture is. And so actually the way you become more profitable is by allowing the time to build these things. But because it's short term, because in the short term, then you've got to be prepared to take a bit of a hit. So you've got to be prepared to lose a few games, to maybe have a dip in your profits or whatever, because you're taking time to do these things.
So Will, sorry to interrupt you there. Are we talking about mindset as well? Are we talking about not being controlled by fear, and not being controlled by, what's going to happen, and the doubt and the hesitation in a way? Is that what we're talking about? Is having that mindset of, hey, we've made a decision, let's go for it, kind of thing?
So I think it is, but the difficulty is getting to the point where everyone's in that headspace. So how do you
how do you do that?
So we did it through, you know, just through a huge amount of talking. Wow. So a lot of our team meetings, you know, I remember because I was only 18, 19 when this kind of all kicked off. And I remember being in team meetings. We had like these 3-hour team meetings where we spoke about rugby for about 10 minutes. And then 2 hours 50 was spent talking about, well, why these values? Or why are we doing this purpose? Why? And because the part of the backstory is when Brendan and Edward came in, they sacked 14 players in a day. So in one day, they sacked 14 players and brought in 15, 16 new guys. And there was a huge discrepancy between, you know, on the face of it, the talent of them. So we were letting go of international players and bringing in guys that not necessarily we'd heard of, type thing.
Yeah.
But the reason they were brought in was because the guys that left weren't guys that were going to buy into what we were trying to do. And the guys that we were bringing in were phenomenal people who turned out to be very good rugby players. So the reason I say that is because when Brendan said this, you got to picture some lads really disliked Brendan to begin with, because he essentially just got rid of their best mate.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. You just for at the time they didn't understand why. So what Brendan did brilliantly was he allowed us to be heard. So he allowed all the players to voice their opinion, to voice their disagreement, to their resentment, all these things, and then explained, well, this is the reasons why we're doing this. And I think that's how we got the buy-in, because it's when people make change, they underestimate the power of just being open about it and explaining it. People go, right, we're going to do this. I want you to go and do that. Poof, off you go. And then it's like if you're being told that and you fundamentally disagree and you've not had the opportunity to actually just ask a question, you go, well, sod that. Why would I? No, they're not my values, or I don't agree with this. So I'm going to crack on and do my own thing. And what happens is then we call it kind of bullshit productions.
I love that, bullshit production.
Yeah, so you want to avoid bullshit productions. So in what we talk about there is the coach comes. So talk about, you know, the academy boys. So you go through their development plans, and, you know, we need to focus on X, Y, and Z. And they go, yeah, Eddie, yeah, no dramas. Yeah, I'm going to go away. I'm going to do these extras. I'm going to do that. Cool. You go, right, brilliant meeting. That kid goes away and goes, sod that. Like, yeah. Eddie doesn't play anymore. Like, he doesn't know what I've got to deal with at home. So I'm just going to crack on. And it's that's what we wanted to avoid. So, and that's what you get so much in business, is people telling without and the reality is, even if actually nothing changed. So let's say I told you to do something, you told me you didn't want to do it. We had a conversation, but we still ended up doing what I said. The fact that you've had the opportunity to say something, the fact that I've listened to you, that I've given you a voice, means that you're much more inclined to still give it a crack because you feel listened to, because you feel respected and valued, because I've given you that opportunity. And I think it's little things like that that people don't think about that make a huge, huge difference when you're trying to implement change.
So it's all about, again, it's all about that relationship, that trust, that that not focus on the outcome, but focus on the people, right? And this triggers my mind. I mean, for the last few years, I've been trying in football as well to implement things with an expert of my energy game, one of our experts, Stephen Rolnick, who is the father of motivational interviewing. A motivational interviewing is all about, giving people a voice, making sure that we create an environment in which, everyone is allowed to say what they think and they feel at any given time, and there is no expectations and there is no judgment. And so I believe it's very powerful, and I believe that I think we should be be more brave to try to change those things. What obviously once you won the first title, and once obviously you guys went from underperforming to be one of the greatest teams in Europe, how did you maintain that dressing room culture? How did you maintain those relationships? Because I guess some of the lads probably went like, well, I'm a big dude now. You know what I mean? I don't need to listen to this anymore. I'm beyond the team. Maybe there was a few of those. So how did you maintain that?
So this is, we spoke just before the call, and again, you see it in sport all the time, and often in football, because of the transient nature of the managers, where a new manager will come in, all of a sudden the team starts winning, and then the following season they just go right back to where they were beforehand. So we were very conscious that we didn't want this to just be a one-hit wonder and a honeymoon patch. We wanted this to be, we spoke about it loads, that we wanted this to outlive all of us.
Wow,
we wanted
okay.
to look back in 10, 20 years time and see the club being as successful, and it would have to change and evolve, and because it would be different people, the world will be different, then, but to still have those kind of fundamental foundations that we'd put in place. So the way we did it, so our team psych always said about this analogy where he said culture, relationships, trust is no different to physical training. So if we want to get stronger in the gym, we've got to train harder. If we want to get faster on the pitch, we've got to run more. So if you want to maintain and improve your culture and relationships, you've got to train it. You've got to allocate time, permission to talk about it. So if we stop training in the gym, we become weaker. If we stop running on the pitch, we become slower. If we stop talking and training culture and relationships, they'd start to deteriorate. So it was this mindset, okay, well, how do we actually train it then? How do we, and there's no rocket science. It was just having the conversations, but it was actually making sure we did them as part of our training. So at the start of at least one or two team meetings a week, we'd have the first 10 minutes was just have a conversation with your table. So they put some questions on the board, which would be anything as serious as, what's your biggest fear? Who inspired you as a kid? To as jokey as, were you ever in a band as a young man, or, yeah. or anything embarrassing?
Were you, Will? Were you in a band?
I actually was. Yeah, I used to play the drums. So, and the whole reason for that is, to continue to build the relationships, to continue to get to know each other. And initially we thought it was a bit of a piss take. We don't need to be taught how to have a conversation with grown men. But then when someone you thought you knew really well suddenly gives you an answer that you weren't expecting, you go, Christ, actually, I don't know you as well as I thought I did. So it was, and then we used to have structured conversation about the values. So what do our values mean to us right here, right now, in this moment? What do they mean to us building up to this final in a month's time? How are we gonna make sure that we live these values and make them real? So it was having those conversations, but as I say, making them part of the training day. So again, where businesses in particular get it wrong is they think, oh, we go bowling once a month after work on a Thursday, and they think they're going to have a great culture. It's like, well, no, because what you're telling people is that actually the culture's secondary. Get the work done first. The work's important. Then we'll look after you. Then we'll think about it. So by factoring it into the working day or the training day, what you're saying is this is important. We're prepared to take you away from work to create this thing, to maintain this thing. which is then going to help us in the long run. So it's those small subconscious kind of messages that make the difference. So I think that was a massive way how we maintained it. And then secondly, again, the onus being put on the players.
Yeah.
So being very player driven. So if there were any discrepancies or any issues, 9 times out of 10 they'd be sorted before the coaches even knew about it. Unless it was something pretty serious, then obviously you'd have to bypass us and go to whoever. But those sort of things, and I think that's where things get driven if they're by the group. This kind of shared ownership.
So I suppose for the manager there, from what you're saying, his success or his personal success was more kind of like recruiting the right people, because then those people took care of the changing room. So maybe he didn't have to be so involved in driving those things and solving those little issues that happen in a not every day, every minute in a changing room, because he had done his job by probably putting together a strong dressing room of good people.
Yeah, this is it. And actually, Brendan only stayed for a year and a half. He left after a year and a half. And the Mark McCall, who's still director of rugby now, he's been doing it for the last decade. Brendan brought him in as his right-hand man to almost say, I'm going to get this thing started, because he's a very, very passionate guy. You know, if you want someone to create change, he's your man. To then give it to Mark to then maintain and build, when Mark's done a phenomenal job in doing that. But this is it. You know, so the best example I'll give you is when we did the values piece. You know, we're on a flight out to so once we kind of agreed what the values were, we're on a flight out to South Africa on a pre-season tour, and every player on the flight was tasked with writing down what their interpretation of those values is, like what their behaviors for them are. When we landed, we handed them all in. They kind of went through them, and because obviously rugby players are not the smartest of people in the world, so a lot of us had very similar kind of things. So they got a shortlist and said, right, here's an overriding kind of viewpoint of the whole group. Let's now distill them and be really precise. And then we had a conversation on that. And the whole thing was, we do not leave this room until everyone is in agreement with what these behaviors are. And almost, because then what happens then is, if someone falls short of the values, someone does something wrong, it's not the coaches you answer to, it's your best mates you answer to. Because they turn and go, hang on, Will, like we were all in that room and we all signed up to these. We're all trying our best and you're taking the piss and going and doing that. Absolutely. And that feels 10 times worse than a teacher or a coach or a boss kind of coming down on you. And that's where player-driven stuff and team-driven stuff is so valuable, because you care about these people. You know, you generally have an affection for them and a sense of love and gratitude towards them. So you don't want to let them down, which means you're more likely to then, you know, do the stuff you meant to be doing.
Go the extra mile.
This is it. And I think it is the people. It is entirely. That's where the club have always been brilliant, is they've always brought in good people. And they have brought in a few initially rogue characters, but then the due diligence in bringing them in, they've slotted right in and hugely added to kind of the team and the culture and all that stuff.
No, listen, amazing, Will. I mean, winning the dressing room culture. I mean, in just 22 minutes, 23 minutes, you've given us so much, and I'm so grateful and so glad. Listen, we need to meet up together again very soon. Yeah. You need to come back to the training ground, or we'll meet up for a coffee. Meet up
or a cold one, either or.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, that would be probably better.
Yeah.
But listen, thank you so much for your time, Will. And I'm sure that loads of our listeners who are obviously athletes like yourself and coaches and so on, I mean, they'll be probably inspired by some of these tips, and hopefully that will also inspire some change and will inspire some, you know, thinking about their own culture, right?
Fingers crossed. Yeah, I think it's, if I was to leave with one thing, it would just be,
please do.
It would just be don't think too big. So don't think we want to create this huge culture, and just go day by day. You know, what can we do today that means the environment is slightly better when we leave than when I got here this morning? What can I do today that means the group is slightly tighter when I leave than when I got here this morning? And I think if you break it down into those tiny little increments, what you'll find is in the next month or 2 months, all of a sudden everyone's like, shit, we're in.
Yeah.
we've got this cool thing. So I think it's, break it down and just go day by day with it.
Brilliant. Listen, thank you so much, Will.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you.